Thomas, he's one of the main characters. He's actually narrating how his parents threw a big party and the house catches on fire. And he was yeeted out the window as a baby. And Arnold does a diving attempt of a catch, but he does kind of fumble the baby.
It wasn't the best throw either. Just putting it out there.
And I couldn't tell if they broke the window with Thomas the baby or if they threw an elbow and then threw him out, because the glass falling was pretty simultaneous.
I think the baby broke the window.
That would explain a lot about Thomas, actually.
Hey, Victor! Hey, Victor!
Hey, Victor! Remember that dog that used to live over there?
Hey, Victor!
I remember one time we had this fry bread eating contest, and he ate 15 pieces of fry bread. It was cool.
Thomas already being a little bit socially awkward. He's very, dumb, positive. Very SpongeBob-esque.
That's a good way of putting it.
And Victor is a Squidward.
Hey, Squidward!
Hey, Victor!
Hey, Victor, what do you know about fire?
Hey, Victor! Hey, Victor!
Hey, Victor!
Hey, Victor, heard your dad's living in Phoenix, Arizona now. Hey, Victor, heard your dad left. Hey, Victor, what happened? Victor, why'd he leave? Does he leave, Victor?
Shut up, Thomas! Just shut up!
Squidward!
When they say, were you dropped as a child? Because they think you're a little bit weird and off and stupid. I think Thomas was dropped as a child because Arnold muffed the catch.
I think there's no doubt about that.
I remember when he took me for breakfast at Denny's.
Shut up, Thomas!
Hey, Victor. Welcome back to another Just Play It episode, eh? I don't know why I said Canadian. That's just what it reminded me. Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's Just Play It. I am your host, Jimmy Crackcorn, Captain Crunch, Maestro of the Microwave. I'm Mr. Popcorn. I'm James, and that's all I have to say about that.
All right. Thanks. Nice intro there, buddy. And I'm co-host Nick. I'm the Chief Corn Dog. I am that glizzy dipped in that deep fried goodness. I am the ringleader of the roller, the Corn Dog. That's who I am.
Glizzy dipped in that deep fried goodness. I like it.
Not bad.
Bringing some real flavor this week. Welcome back, everybody. Benny Noodle, what's poppin', Corn Dogs? We're back. Another week, another great movie. Sometimes it's a good day to die, and sometimes it's a good day to listen to this podcast. We're watching Smoke Signals, everybody. 1998, 90s in the house. Stand up.
If you're confused by that intro, just stick around. It'll make sense.
If you're confused by that intro, obviously you've never seen the movie that we're watching this week.
I think that probably goes for a large chunk of our audience, buddy.
I think it will, because have you ever heard of this movie before I put it on our sheet?
Never have.
Haha, I knew it.
How about you?
I have. I've seen this movie in college. I put this on the sheet, our watch list, because we watched a movie last season of Wind Talkers that featured the actor Adam Beach. And we were talking about how he's pretty much like one of 20 indigenous people actors in Hollywood films. And we were saying that the only other movies we know him from is Joe Dirt. Maybe if you've seen Flags of Our Fathers. I did remember this movie that I watched in college and thought, oh, you know what? I remember liking this movie. I would love to rewatch it with Nick. And once again, I want to get a movie that you have not seen and get a fresh take on it.
You have succeeded in doing that because it's a movie I've not seen, not heard of, know nothing about. So I was excited to watch this movie.
Hell yes. Smoke Signals is in the popcorn bucket this week. Nick, tell me about this movie. Who's the director here?
This movie is directed by a gentleman named Chris Eyre. This is actually his debut film. He is a member of the Cheyenne and the Arapaho tribes. He had done a few short films prior to this, but this was really his coming out. This movie did really well at, I think, Sundance, a lot of independent film festivals. And I don't think he did much beyond this. I think he continued to do a lot of movies about, Indian culture.
I think he did he had like a steady career after this.
Yeah, but I mean like nothing mainstream.
Like a couple episodes of major TV shows and whatnot. But this movie was a milestone for indigenous people. It was the first movie that was directed, written by, all-starred, maybe produced by as well, Native Americans, Indians, indigenous people of this land. Huge milestone for that community. And this movie does star Adam Beach friend of the show. We featured him on Wind Talkers, aforementioned. Evan Adams and Irene Bedard. Adam Beach is one of those Native American actors that would pop up everywhere. He's been in hundreds of projects. And can I just say something about the actors in this movie? There's a little bit of, it's not so much a talking point, but I just want to shout it out.
Yeah.
For Indigenous peoples that basically make up less than 4% of the United States population, you're pretty much going to see a lot of usual suspects when it comes to Native Americans in film. And there's only so many. So Adam Beach, like we said, friend of the show, he usually plays a Native American guy. Second build, we got Evan Adams, who I honestly haven't seen in a whole lot of other projects, but I was having a fun time deep diving all these guys and gals IMDb's. A lot of them were just in the same projects, and it's just fun to see like how tight knit of a circle that is. Irene Bedard, aka my queen, is the voice of Pocahontas from the animated Disney movie. And fun fact, she actually did voice Pocahontas in Wreck-It Ralph. Ralph Breaks the Internet.
Fun little fun fact.
Yeah. Also in this movie, we got Tantu Cardinal, who is very recognizable. She's been in a ton of stuff. She actually was just recently in Killers of the Flower Moon. She was in Dances with Wolves as well, which, funny enough, does get mentioned in this movie.
Quite a few times, yeah.
She was in that movie with Graham Greene. And if you Google Graham Greene, you're going to say, there's that Canadian actor who always plays an Indigenous person. Tantu Cardinal was just recently in the show Echo, Marvel's Echo, a miniseries, which was pretty good. I watched it. I enjoyed it. I liked it. Gary Farmer, he's in this movie as well. Taika Waititi's FX's Reservation Dogs is a show I haven't watched, but I've only heard good things about. He's made a couple appearances on that show. And then we got Elaine Miles. She plays a very small part in this movie, but it was cool to find out that she played opposite, yet again, Graham Greene in one episode of The Last of Us, which I recently watched. So discovering that, I thought, oh my God, there's only so many of these community members that are also actors that they just pop up everywhere. Going down this list, last up, we got Simon Baker. He plays the young Thomas. And I gotta say, whoever casted the young versions of the main actors did a really good job.
Very good job. Given
the limited actors available, kid actors and adult actors. So if you Google Simon Baker, he has a very recognizable face. And finally, I want to end it with this, Nick. I want to end with Cody Lightning, who plays a young Victor. This is the young Adam Beach in the movie. He also recently showed up in the Marvel miniseries Echo as Cousin Biscuits. Hilariously enough, he recently made a 2023 mockumentary called Hey Victor that was him as a adult actor trying to get a Smoke Signals 2 off the ground. Now, Nick, I did plug in a YouTube link here of a clip of this movie, and I would love for you to pull it up and play it so we can both watch it.
I would love to.
This is so funny.
I'm Cody Lightning, Little Victor, as most people know me or should know me. Smoke Signals, big movie. I was in it.
Don't leave. Don't go. Hey, come on. Dad, don't go.
That was pretty good. If your dad was just leaving to the store to get you a fucking slush. He's leaving your life forever. He is leaving you and your mother alone. And he's moving to Arizona. And he's gonna be living in a little trailer next to his new girlfriend who he's not sleeping with? I don't think so. This is gonna haunt you for the rest of your life, okay? Again.
I found out about that
really
today. Good. And I was like, I think I need to watch that because I really enjoyed him. Played a very small part in Marvel's Echo, but he was one of the highlights.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to watch that. That looks hilarious. Especially having seen this movie now.
Poking fun at just like his 15 minutes of fame and just trying to capitalize on that. I can only imagine the laughs to be had. Okay, Nick, tell me about the budget of this movie.
Yeah, we have an estimated budget of $2 million, so pretty small project. Although this is an independent project, so $2 million's a decent sized budget. Then a worldwide box office of $6.7 million.
Small budget, small return, but a positive return with that. Can't argue with that.
If you're an independent filmmaker and this is your debut film and you put a lot of work into this and to you it means a lot, then generating $4.7 million is pretty damn good.
All right, let me hit you with this log line for 1998's Smoke Signals. Arnold rescued Thomas from a fire when he was a child. Thomas thinks of Arnold as a hero, while Arnold's son Victor resents his father's alcoholism, violence, and abandonment of his family. Wah, wah.
And with that,
do you want to watch this movie based on that logline? On paper, I wouldn't, but for this podcast, we did.
We do. Plot talk time.
Let's jump into plot talk. Plot talk.
So we opened up on the Coeur d'Alene Indian Reservation, and it has a really funny opening because we get this voiceover from this radio personality, and he cuts to a guy who does traffic. And the guy who does traffic is a guy sitting on this van at a crossroads, and he goes, "How's the traffic?" And he just goes, "Big truck just went by. That's about it." All right, so traffic's not.
And they said this van broke down in the 70s, and it's just been there ever since. And then I think his name is
Lester Falls Apart.
He's the professional in the field when it comes to the traffic, and he's the meteorologist. So we're like in real small town, Indian reservation, real small time stuff. We do get this flashback to July 4th, 1976, with a house party that Thomas is he's one of the main characters. He's actually narrating how his parents threw a big party and all the local Indians on the Indian reservation were invited, and it was a hoot. It was fucking lit, apparently, at Thomas. Every Indian in town was there, which I thought was weird because it's a super small house and the flashback scenes only show about maybe 12 people. So I'm like, really? Everybody from the reservation was at this party? This is where we kind of get that unreliable narrator, because stories and storytelling is a big part of this movie, and lies and truth are also a big part of this movie. So we're like, okay, do we have an unreliable narrator here? Is it super biased? Regardless, we're at this party and the house catches on fire. And Thomas, who is speaking, says, I don't remember the fire because I was an infant, but my parents died in it, and he was yeeted out the window as a baby. And Arnold, Gary Farmer, pulls a fucking Omri from Indian in the Cupboard and does a diving, hands extended out attempt of a catch, but he does kind of fumble the baby.
Yeah, it wasn't the best throw either. Just putting it out there.
And I couldn't tell if they broke the window with Thomas the baby or if they threw an elbow and then threw him out, because the glass falling was pretty simultaneous.
I think the baby broke the window. But when the fire's going, no. You don't have time to think.
That would explain a lot about Thomas, actually.
Yeah.
When they say, were you dropped as a child? Because they think you're a little bit weird and off and stupid. I think Thomas was dropped as a child because Arnold muffed the catch. And Thomas kind of fell on the ground. And you and I both, before we started recording, we were saying,
yeah,
Thomas may questionably be on the spectrum.
I think there's no doubt about that. Could have been smoke inhalation as well.
Not really good hands dealt there.
Kind of put behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
And then the voiceover tells us a lot about Arnold. After this incident, he started to drink a lot, and he kept saying how he was going to disappear one day. And he always threatened to disappear, and he never did, until one day he just did. He just disappeared from everyone's lives, and never to be seen again.
Yep. So that's the information we are given right off the bat. In addition, we do know that Arnold did cut his long, luscious hair from the passing of Thomas's parents, because Thomas's mom and dad did die in the house fire. But Thomas and a similar aged friend, neighbor, Victor Joseph,
Hey, Victor,
did survive that fire, despite, I guess, a bunch of people being in the house. And Nick, can you please Google the name Eduardo Franco, you probably would recognize this guy, but honestly, Arnold kind of looked like this modern day actor with his long hair, but obviously way more overweight. He's in a bunch of Netflix stuff. He was just in Stranger Things season 4. He was the pothead surfer pizza guy.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly who you're talking about. And yeah, I see it. I 100% see it.
That's what he looked like.
We get our first introduction to the boys now as young adolescents. And they're at the local reservation school. And Victor's playing basketball. He loves basketball. He's playing with a couple friends. Thomas comes in wearing a suit, very nerdy, glasses. He has the very traditional braids, 2 braids. And he just pulls up a chair and sits there and watches the boys play basketball. The boys playing basketball ask Victor a question, which is, who do you think was the greatest basketball player of all time? And Victor says, Geronimo, right? An Indian figure. And they're all laughing. And then Thomas just goes,
Hey, Victor, what about your dad?
and Victor goes, well, what about my dad?
Super awkward.
So right off the bat, we're starting to realize that Thomas has a very high reverence for Victor's dad.
Thomas already being a little bit socially awkward, and he kind of rambles a whole lot, and he's very like dumb positive, very SpongeBob-esque, I would say.
That's a good way of putting it.
And Victor is a Squidward. But yeah, Thomas obviously loves Arnold, who is Victor's dad, who abandoned him when he was a child, and we'll dive into more of that backstory and how much Arnold kind of sucks because he was an alcoholic and he was abusive towards Victor and his wife. But Thomas loves Arnold because he saved him as a child, and he's an all-around positive guy anyway. So it just kind of comes with the territory of he gives everyone the benefit of the doubt.
The movie starts to kicks off really when Victor's mom gets a phone call letting her know that Arnold has passed somewhere in Phoenix. And that's all we know. So he's been gone for 10, 12 years. And all we hear about is that he has died from some lady. We don't know who this lady is.
Yeah, she just says, hey, this is Susie Song. I was Arnold's neighbor. Just letting you know he passed away and all his stuff is still here. And so is his pickup truck. Someone should come get it.
It's up to Victor to go get it. His mom can't go. They're pretty poor, we find out. And Thomas says, I'll give you the money, but you have to take me with you to go get your dad's stuff. And I think this is his connection to Victor's dad. And he wants to be a part of it. And this is the first time they're in a general store on the reservation. And we get this really cool transition. So Victor leaves the store.
They do this a lot, yeah.
At leaving the store, going through the door, he's an adolescent. And then after he goes through the door, he is a child with his dad there.
Yeah, they do a lot of these blending transitions with the child actor versions of the character and the adult version actor of the character. Very cool. Not the first time we've seen it watching movies and TV shows, but when it transitions outside from the store, little Victor walks out and little Thomas walks out and he's holding a sparkler. And he says, Victor, look at this. Isn't this cool? And Victor's like, yeah, whatever. Like, get away from me. I don't care. It's kind of like, I'm not sure what the symbolism is, but the sparkler does come up later. Fireworks were used at the house party that where the house burned down. So, kind of imagine how the house burned down. But Thomas is very positive and like, wow, look at the shiny thing. And Victor's very jaded as a little kid. He's very angry. And Thomas is all about looking at the bright side of stuff from a kid to an adult. So a little bit of foreshadowing of what we see there. So then Victor gets in the car with Arnold, his father, and he has this whole vanishing monologue almost because Victor is just a kid in the car and he's just listening to his dad talk. He's actually holding it's not funny. He's holding his dad's beer as he drives because Arnold is obviously intoxicated.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking about, oh, I'm a magician. They say this a lot. Like Arnold's a magician.
Yeah.
There's no practical magic tricks, no sleight of hand magic, no rabbit out of a hat. But he does say, oh, if I could make all the white people vanish, I would. If I could make the reservation vanish, I would. if I could make all the little Indian boys named Victor vanish, I would. And you're like, oh, that was mean. And then he says, if I could make myself vanish, I would. So you're like, okay, Arnold is not right in the head. And he's an alcoholic, which is sometimes a fun time, not the type of fun time with Arnold, the alcoholic.
No. And I picked up here, and we'll see it a few times throughout the movie, but as his dad's saying this, like, oh, I can make all this disappear, and the white people and the reservation disappear. Basically, it would be better. And you can see Victor's face start to change a little bit when he's watching his dad as he's saying this. And what I pick up from Victor is he doesn't like the excuses, almost like it's an excuse for why he is the way he is. Like, oh, this factor and that factor and this happened, and that's why life's so bad. And you could tell Victor's thinking to himself, no, it's bad because of the choices you're making. And so that was the first glimpse I got of that. We'll see it a few more times throughout the movie, but he does not like that, or even, like you said before, like the embellished stories, anything that's not grounded in reality. Has a very like jaded sense of reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at the end of this car ride, things seem to be going well. Obviously, Arnold's drunk driving, and we don't like that. But at the end of this ride, Arnold asked his son to give him his beer, and Victor drops it. And this just triggers his dad, and his dad smacks him. He goes, oh, come on.
He like punches him.
Yeah, that's a good way to, it was more
close
of a punch
fist. Yeah.
than a smack. Yeah. Causes Victor to run out of the truck, run into the house, and Arnold sees no problem with this. I didn't even hit you that hard. So we're like, okay, so he's not just like alcoholic, he's also abusive. So we're learning a lot about Arnold in this one car ride.
Yeah, it was sad. It was very sad. So Victor has grown up underneath a very a poor household, pretty poor home life. And Thomas has grown up with him in the same Indian reservation. And these kid and adult transitions kind of evoke that it's like a tight-knit town. And at the same time, things don't change much, and neither do the people. So it just seems like Victor and Thomas are just stuck in their own cycles when they do these kid to adult swings in the movie. And Thomas, it seems like he idolizes Victor, and he definitely idolizes Arnold, maybe idolizes Victor, but I think he's just always kind of looking for a positive role model. I mean, you can even say like maybe a male role model, because he only lives with his grandma because his parents are super dead. And we do get this flashback of Victor at a fire at like a trash can hobo fire. Mm-hmm. Thomas comes up and he gives us one of the first of many, hey, Victor. Hey, Victor.
Hey, Victor.
And then Victor doesn't say anything. Thomas just rambles.
Hey, Victor, what do you know about fire?
He says certain chemicals burn certain colors.
Hey, Victor, heard your dad's living in Phoenix, Arizona now.
And Victor just fucking demolishes Thomas with a, what color do you think your mom and dad were when they burned?
Yeah, it was really vicious.
It was triggered because Thomas, again, questionable on the spectrum.
Hey, Victor!
Hey, Victor, why do you think your dad left? Does he hate you? Does he do that? So he's very like not in tune with social cues. And this just triggers Victor into delivering a verbal haymaker about his super dead parents.
This is where I'm thinking, okay, Thomas is on the spectrum.
Yeah, they don't say it. But
A, Thomas, yeah, that's A. B, he says things to set off Victor, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just the lack of social cues. And then you start to realize, oh, he always asks about Arnold, not because it's mean or rude. He doesn't understand that it's upsetting to Victor, but he just wants to know more about Arnold, because the few times, Thomas's memory of Arnold was this amazing guy. And so the more he can learn about him, the better, the happier he'd be, like a dad he never had. And Victor obviously doesn't like this, because he's like, if in his mind, he's saying, if you had this dad, you'd hate him. So I don't get why you love him.
He beats me up all the time and is abusive and sucks.
So that's not good. So back to present day, Victor has agreed to let Thomas come with him to go pick up his dad's stuff. And they're going to do this by hitchhiking their way to a bus station, taking a bus. They're poor, so they don't really have a way to get there. So they're leaving the reservation
They do get picked up by a couple homegirls
by two friends
driving backwards in a car. Did you know why they were driving backwards?
It could be that the transmission was busted and that reverse was the only one that worked. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, no.
And for those who don't know, the reason you could do that is usually when you're in drive, your transmission has to go through multiple gears. Reverse is just a singular gear, so it's not like it has to go from first to second to third. So if something in that chain is broken, your transmission's done. But reverse is just a single gear you could do it in.
We'll talk about Indian reservations, but shocker, they're not thriving, and a lot of people are just trying to make ends meet. They're living paycheck to paycheck. So when the radio station's van broke down in 1978 or whatever, and it's been chilling there for 20 years because it's probably too damn expensive to fix. So everyone's like kind of just rolling with the punches and just living in kind of lower class standards from being on this Indian reservation.
Hey, Thomas. Need a ride?
You bet.
What are you gonna trade for it? We're Indians, remember? We barter.
It's kind of like that meme going around right now. It's like, we're Indians. Of course we like XYZ. Earlier, Victor's mom asked him not to leave. He said, I won't. She said, promise me. And he said, do you want me to sign a paper? She goes, we're Indians. We don't like signing stuff. And then in this scene, they're asking like, oh, you could hitchhike with us, but we need something in return? And Thomas is like, do you like stories? I have stories.
Again, with this being the first mostly indigenous persons produced, acted, written, directed movie, I kind of think they felt the need to include a lot of those tongue-in-cheek jokes and references to their history and culture. So it was kind of like, yeah, you kind of had to do it.
Yeah.
When you watch Avengers Endgame, you know, it's like you kind of have to make all these inside joke references because it's the time to do it. And with this being the first production of Native Americans being represented in a modern day setting as regular people, not just as the Native American in the room, I think they kind of felt the need to include a lot of these jokes and these references to their lineage and their culture. They get a ride from these two homegirls and they drop them off at the bus stop and they say, hey, do you have your passports? And Thomas and Victor say, no, why? We're in the United States. The two girls say, that's as foreign as it gets. And it's another jab of we are displaced people. We were forced into this reservation and America is almost foreign to us because of how our ancestry has been mistreated. So it's another like kind of like you kind of had to throw it in there, little jab at mainstream America and indigenous voice filmmaking. I love it. I'm here for it. A lot of Native Americans were here for it. This is very refreshing to see. Native Americans, indigenous peoples, they were hungry for this type of film, and Chris Eyre is trying to deliver it at every corner and speak for his own people. Now, I gotta say, they travel by bus, and Nick, the bus door opens, and the bus driver is Chuck Howard, rest in peace. I personally know this man because he was a team member of the transportation department for my uncle, Tom Gordon, rest in peace.
No way.
Yeah, the bus doors open, and he has like a resting face where he just shows his teeth. Like he constantly looks like he's staring at the sun, is the best way I can describe it. And I saw that face and I thought, is that fucking Chuck Howard? Look it up. Lo and behold, Chuck Howard, Chuck and his son, Nick Howard, they helped fix my car, my 350Z. Nick is a mechanic and he actually worked on Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. So he had a lot of experience with 350Zs. So fun fact, the bus driver and his son did help me fix my car one time when I was down in La La Land. So shout out Chuck.
That's cool. That's really cool, actually.
So we're on this bus and we do get a little bit more character exposition here. Thomas and Victor, they sit next to an alternate of the Olympic team. And Thomas is loving this. He's talking her ear off and she's talking back. Victor, on the other hand, we get a little bit glimpse of how he is just hardened and jaded and just tells off the gymnast by saying, oh, you were an alternate? That means you didn't actually compete. And she just gets up out of her seat, leaves, and Thomas says, "Why'd you do that?" Victor replies with, "You can't trust anyone. She was a liar. Why would a gymnast be on a bus? You got to grow up." Victor had to grow up way faster than any normal kid, and we're not quite sure if Thomas ever grew up.
I also took this scene as what I was talking about earlier with the Victor doesn't like excuses or the embellished stories. So he saw this gymnast story as either an excuse or all that was, again, was an embellishment or a story. He doesn't trust any of these stories. And to be fair, a lot of these stories have been embellished throughout the movie. And he always says that's not how it happened. That's a lie. With this lady, it's an excuse. Like, oh, well, you didn't make it. So then what are we even talking about here? There's no use talking about it if it didn't happen. And so I was thinking about, the scene with his dad where he's hearing his dad's excuses and he doesn't want to hear it. Kind of reminds him of like the empty stories of his dad.
Yeah, Thomas is very full of wonder and imagination, and Victor is very ground level, sees everything for face value, is what it is. He speaks his mind too, no filter. They make a stop and they pull over to this diner or restaurant or something. And Thomas, again, is just rambling on and on about stories. A lot of storytelling in this movie. And he tells Victor about the time that he was at a bridge in Spokane. And Arnold pulled up, said, "What the hell are you doing here?" Thomas said he was looking for a vision or some sort of spiritual guide. And Arnold says, "The only thing you're going to get out here is getting mugged. Like, let's go to Denny's." And Thomas gets a grand slam breakfast. And Victor's just like, "Dude, you told me this story 1,000 times. Can you shut up?" And this just brings us back to how Thomas sees Arnold as a hero and the dad he never had, because just imagine you're having a great day looking at the river and your dad pulls up and says, "Let's go to Denny's." You're thinking, wow, what a great memory. And Victor, on the other hand, is like, my dad never treated me like that. And hearing you talk so highly of him angers me that I need to go in the bathroom and stare at myself in the mirror.
And as he's staring at himself in the mirror, if I'm not mistaken, we get another kid transition. I saw this scene with Thomas and Arnold almost as either Thomas remembers it differently than it was, which could be very true. But if it is true that Thomas is almost the son that Arnold wanted, a little more submissive, very in touch with being an Indian, right? Because we see in a flashback, I think that comes up here soon, that while he's drunk, he asks Victor, "Who's your favorite Indian?" And Victor says, "No one." He doesn't have quite that Indian pride that his dad wants him to have. He doesn't buy into the stories. He's just not as enamored with Indian culture as Thomas is. And I think Arnold probably really liked that about Thomas, even though he was weird. So he liked the Indian stories and he was very submissive. And so Arnold treated him better. And Victor's basically thinking, what the fuck? Why? Because he was trying to push back, be strong, obviously, with an abusive father. So there's a weird dichotomy going on there with like those two relationships and why that relationship between Victor and Arnold was so different than Thomas and Arnold.
And also, like you said, and going back to what I said, the unreliable narrator, because Thomas is telling most of the stories in this movie. So maybe the way it played out, maybe Arnold was way more rude in reality to Thomas in that situation, but Thomas just remembers it as a fond memory of going out to breakfast with Arnold. And maybe Arnold is just way more belligerent with Thomas, but he doesn't tell the story like that. There's a lot of misconceptions and you don't know what is quite true and what is a fabrication with a lot of the stories that are being told in this movie.
Agreed. Eventually, and I thought this was going to be more of a storyline, Victor talks to Thomas about him being not an Indian, looks very nerdy. He needs to be more aggressive, more assertive. You got to take those braids out and let your hair down. You can't be so nice and believe everyone.
It's like, stop smiling.
Thomas, I don't know what you're talking about half the time. Why is that? I mean, you just go on and on talking about nothing. Why can't you have a normal conversation? You're always trying to sound like some damn medicine man or something. Don't you even know how to be a real Indian?
I guess not.
I guess I'll have to teach you then, ain't it? First of all, quit grinning like an idiot. Indians ain't supposed to smile like that. Get stoic. White people will run all over you if you don't look mean. You gotta look like a warrior. You gotta look like you just came back from killing a buffalo.
But our tribe never hunted buffalo. We were fishermen.
What? Thomas, you gotta look like a warrior.
I gotta say, like, it seems like Victor,
Hey, Victor.
and Thomas both are kind of expressing stereotypes in their own right of indigenous people, because Victor's saying, let your hair down, look mean, don't be happy, which just sounds phony, because you're not supposed to put on an act. You're not supposed to put on a mask. You're just supposed to be yourself. So Thomas is being himself. But on the flip side, Thomas gets accused of watching Dances with Wolves over 200 times and evoking the Native American culture. And he does seem a little bit more intuitive with spirituality. And Victor is all about that machismo and saying, you got to look like you just killed a buffalo, kind of playing into a stereotype of Indians kill buffalo and they're badass. So Victor's all about trying to be a tough guy and using his culture as a mask for masculinity. And Thomas Thomas embraces the culture almost a little bit too much, where it seems like you're doing too much, Thomas. You're doing too much with the medicine man stuff, as Victor accuses him of.
Not living in reality here, Thomas.
Like, relax.
Yeah.
So he says, lose the braids, lose the suit, and they pull up to the bus stop, and what happens?
Thomas goes into the bathroom, takes his braids out. He has this little like slow motion as he walks out of the bathroom, kind of like shaking his head, letting his hair flow down.
I gotta say, big McLovin vibes from the scene.
Yes.
When he walks out, kind of like McLovin walking out of the store with the vest.
Yeah. He has a fry bread shirt on, which fry bread is, it's brought up so much in this movie, but it's an Indian bread. James is showing me he has a sticker on his chest. This is fry bread power. Where did you get that?
I printed it. I wanted to order the shirt, but it wasn't going to get delivered in time. So I pivoted and I printed this at work, and I'm putting it on my blue shirt as we speak.
I like it.
So I am Thomas, baby.
You are now Thomas.
Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. That's pretty good, right?
I'm looking at it. It does look pretty good. It does look pretty good.
I wanted this shirt after I saw the movie the first time. Never got it. Wanted to order it for this podcast recording. Again, didn't do it. Maybe someday. If I watch it a third time, maybe someday.
That's fair.
I do like the scene of Victor teaching, quote unquote, Thomas how to be a quote unquote real Indian. And he's like, hey, don't smile. You look stupid. You're supposed to look mean so people will respect you. They get back to their seats, and these two white guys are staking a claim in their bus seats. And they say, hey, those were our seats. And the white guys say, well, not now. They're kind of like a little bit hickish, a little bit too like, stand my ground. It's my seat now. And they're sent to the back. I do like this moment because Victor does have a growth moment. Because Thomas says, oh, it looks like your warrior phase doesn't work all the time. And Victor clocks this and says, yeah, you know what? It didn't work that time. So I'm gonna take a Thomas approach and smile this out. And he mentions John Wayne, and Victor says, hey, you know what's wrong with John Wayne? That he never shows his teeth, meaning like he never smiles. And then they both smile in that moment, and Victor just makes up this song about John Wayne's teeth to kind of passive aggressively piss off the whites that took his seat, because they're like, oh, they're the two crazy Indians in the back doing this weird chant. No, it's just Victor fucking with these guys and trying to like be a nuisance on the bus.
Yeah.
So I did like this moment a whole lot, because it showed that even though Victor grew up with violence and anger in the house, and he actually punches out Thomas multiple times in flashbacks. Mm-hmm. So you're like, oh, his first resort is his fists.
Cycle of violence. That's what I had written down.
He does take the high road here and kind of turns the other cheek, goes to the back of the bus, and just makes light of the situation. I did like this moment.
Yeah, they're sort of taking the better qualities of each other and learning from each other.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
So they get to Phoenix. So they start walking Thomas is talking Victor's ear off.
Hey, Victor, did you know I was an alternate on the 1980 Olympic team?
As they're walking, I don't know how they know where they're walking to,
Victor.
but they're just walking through the Arizona desert, getting to Arnold's trailer.
Some isolated road that leads to this weird spot where there's 2 trailers.
Yeah.
And 2 people live there.
So we get there, we meet Susie Song, who was the lady who called Victor's mom off the bat.
This is Irene Bedard.
There's some contention. We don't know who Susie Song is in relation to Arnold. Like, were they boyfriend, girlfriend? She refers to him like she loved him like a dad. They were close friends.
She also says he had the eye for me. You know, like, okay, like creepy alcoholic dad. Hopefully not, but probably did.
Kind of got that sense, and just knowing what we know about Arnold, yeah.
But I don't believe it. Do you think that's true or no? I don't think so.
If what was true?
That they banged?
I don't think they banged. I think Arnold wanted to bang.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Because
she's hot.
Susie's hot, yeah. And this is where Victor and Thomas get a little bit more information about Arnold from a third-party source. She does shed light on Arnold's final days, final years, saying, "Oh, he stopped drinking, and we kept each other's secrets, and he was a good guy." But Victor just has that super awful memory of him. Thomas is just loving every part of this journey. He's loving talking to Susie. He tells another story, and Victor says, "Thomas, you're so full of shit. Like, none of this is true." And Susie's like, "Okay, well, like, is it true or is it not true?" And Thomas says, "Hey, tell me a story." And Susie says, "Do you want truth or do you want lies?" So us as audience members, we're thinking, what is goddamn true and what is a lie? I don't know. She's telling the story about Arnold, who's on a basketball court, telling a story about Victor. And the story is essentially about him and Victor hooping it up against some Jesuits. And if you don't know what a Jesuit is, it's just a branch division of Catholic Church. Christianity?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like very devout, strict rules, kind of.
They wear the nerdy ass black robes and the white piece of paper
collar
thing the collar around the neck. And they hoop in that too, just a la Prince and Charlie Murphy's Real Hollywood Stories via Chappelle Show. He plays basketball in this Purple Rain fucking suit, just like these Jesuits.
It's all you got. It's all you need.
Victor is telling the story to Susie, who is supposedly there, although Irene Bedard, the actor, is not there in the scene, but it's insinuated that she's off screen. And it's really just a monologue from Arnold of him telling a story about him and his son playing against these 2 Christian men in a pickup game of basketball.
By the way they were playing, I could have swore they had 7 out of 12 apostles on their side. But my boy Victor, he was magic. He couldn't miss. Those Jesuits didn't have a prayer stopping him fair and square. Come on, Victor, I shouted. Come on, Victor. We're up against the Son and the Father here, and these 2 are going to need the Holy Ghost to beat us.
Arnold's telling the story, and he's getting real into it. He's not making eye contact with Susie, one, because she's not there. He's really envisioning the scene on the court. He says, "Hey, it's a tied game. We need 1 more point."
My boy, he was tough. You gotta have faith, son. Faith. Next basket wins. And he took it to the hoop. And he flew, man. He flew right over that Jesuit. 12 years old, and he was like some kind of indigenous angel or something. Except maybe his wings were made out of TV dinner trays.
I like this line. How'd you feel about this line, and what'd you think of it?
Are you asking about a specific line or just this monologue of his?
About that line, about the TV tray line.
Oh, good line.
I have a take on it. I think it's very creative speaking and writing, because it seems like for so much of Arnold and Victor's life, they've had such a shit hand dealt to them. The whole point of the story, Arnold sums it up. He says,
"My boy Victor, he was the man that day. He took that shot. He won that game. It was the Indians versus the Christians that day. And for at least one day, the Indians won." Woo!
He's almost telling like a fish story, embellishing it. It just seems like he's from a community and his culture has been so beaten down and oppressed that even though it didn't actually happen, he really wanted it to happen. And the wings made of TV trays line just kind of seems like they were brought up from nothing. And for one time, for one highlight of his life and a bonding moment with his son, they were on top of the world. I like the line. I like this scene a whole lot. And we do learn that it was a total fabrication. His son did not make the last shot.
Yeah.
Victor just brings the story back down to earth when we catch up to present day and says, "Oh, he told you I made the shot, huh? Well, that's a lie. He just said that to make me look good, I guess." This tells me that Arnold has a lot of remorse for what he did and the hearts he broke. Even if it wasn't true, he wanted it to be true because his son is like the world to him, even though he fucked it all up.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. For me, I think it just shows Arnold's continued delusion that he never confronted his past or the way he acted about his son, because he's telling these stories as if, you know, there are these happy memories and his son was great, but what it shows, he doesn't know his son and all he has are these stories, but he's also never made an attempt to rectify anything. And so it's really cool to hear that story. And then it gets really sad when Victor says, yeah, that's not true. And Arnold was clinging to these stories he made up in his head to try to make himself happy when he really didn't have anything.
No, you're 100% correct. He is trying to build up his son like he is his own personal hero and he loves him. But the driving force behind that tall tale is remorse and delusion.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's like a high point of the movie, but then it just comes crashing down to a low point because of reality.
Yeah. And at this point in the movie, Victor's the only one who has touch with reality right now. He saw everything that happened with his dad. He's the only one who actually knows him and remembers him the way that he truly was, not how all these other people see him. Everyone else has these stories, but that's all that they are. And Victor's trying to live in the real world and deal with his own issues, but all anybody ever has for him are embellishments and lies and stories and excuses. I'm really feeling bad for Victor at this point in the game, because it would have been nice if Susie could have told him a good thing about his dad, but instead all it was, the best thing that his dad ever said about his own son was just a lie. And that's tough for Victor.
Yeah.
After this, we do get one of those classic scenes where Susie says, well, you should go into his trailer. His stuff's all still there. You should look through it, see if you want to keep anything or just really get to know him through his stuff. Victor says no. This really sets Susie off, and Susie comes to us with a massive revelation in the movie.
Arnold started the fire.
Boom. Yeah, Arnold started the fire because he was way too drunk and he lit off a firework inside of the house. Now, I thought he became an alcoholic because of the whole fire thing, but apparently that's not the case. He was just always this way because he was just like belligerently out of his mind and started a fire with a firework, which is a horrific thing to learn about and like to just drop on this guy's son. Like, hey, you know how your friend's parents died? It was your dad. Your dad did it.
He was super drunk and lit the house on fire.
Yep. And then she tries to make it okay by saying like, oh, he ran back in there. And he's like, yeah, he saved Thomas. He goes, no, he ran back in there looking for you. And it's like, that doesn't make it better.
Also, we don't know that.
Right.
Because the opening flashback, it's all about Thomas getting yeeted out the window as a baby.
Yep.
And Arnold kind of catches him. But Victor apparently has been safe the entire time. So it is like tacked on to the story. And again, we're wondering, is this a reliable source or is this another fabrication? Because Arnold is pretty damn delusional. We don't know if we can trust the storyteller a lot of times in this movie.
That's how I took it. I'm like, this just sounds like another excuse from Arnold, who's just been full of excuses his whole life. Victor goes into his trailer, looks around his stuff, finds his dad's pocket knife. And similar to when his dad cut his hair off through mourning, Victor cuts his hair off with his dad's knife. Does a pretty good job of it too. For doing it for a knife cut.
He looked like he would be named Janet with that haircut. Just
it is
it's
a very
pretty like newscastery
at the shoulders, it's all
feminine.
curled in.
It's very pretty.
Victor goes and gets Thomas, and they're going to take his dad's truck, and they're just going to take off. He's
we
done.
don't even see this. We don't even see this. It's just we just cut to the truck is on the road. We're back to Thomas narrating. He says, "We didn't even say goodbye to Susie. Victor woke me up hella early, butt crack of dawn, and we bounced." So they're just beelining it back to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
And these two get into it, and Thomas hits him with, oh, you're blaming everybody. You're like mad at your dad. And,
you don't even know yourself. You don't know Arnold.
And Victor finally looks at him and tells him, like, he beat me. He was an alcoholic. He beat my mom.
I wish he didn't save you because maybe he would have never left.
Then Thomas hits him with, your dad left your mom, but you left your mom too. You're still around, but you left her, and that makes it worse.
Okay, like you emotionally left, but you're physically still there.
Yeah. Now, I kind of had issue with this because I never saw that in the movie. Him and his mom seemed to have a decent relationship. It was loving enough. They interacted well. I never saw him be like cold or emotionless towards his mom.
Yep, I was going to say the only time that Victor genuinely smiles before his quote-unquote revelation in this movie is when he's with his mom. It's that signing papers scene because his mom is making fry bread. She's like, oh, my arthritis. And Victor's just hanging out with mom sometime. And he's smiling and he's having a great time. And this entire scene, he is showing genuine, sincere joy because he's a mama's boy. Obviously, he's not a papa boy because his papa punched him in the face and beat him his life.
Yeah.
I agree. I didn't think this had a valid argument from Thomas. Thomas knows a lot of stuff because he's a nosy guy and word just gets around town, the small, tight-knit town. But I think that was bullshit. I don't think he knew about the relationship between Victor and his mom.
No. So I thought that
was a bluff.
That was forced.
A little bit.
They're yelling at each other. They don't see that there's this car stopped in the middle of the road. They have to swerve off the side of the road, kind of crash into a drainage ditch.
Fade to black. We open up.
Yeah, they get their wits about them. And the reason this car was in the road is this drunk driver ran another car off of the road. And this is just massively chaotic scene. The woman who got hit is down in the ditch. She's bloody. There's another person down there who's like struggling. The drunk driver, the guy, is being an absolute dickhead. Victor has this revelation where he looks at Thomas and says, Thomas, I'm going to go get help. And Victor starts running. The drunk guy's like, the closest town is 20 miles away. You'll never make it. You're going to help a dead girl. Look at her. She's already dead. And I'm like, you just killed a woman. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. You're admitting to manslaughter.
What? So Victor just is running, and he runs until the sun comes up. And he basically cramps. He's done. He's out for the count. His body's exhausted. He collapses. He gets a vision of his dad who's going to come pick him up. And Victor like smiles like he's happy to see his dad. Turns out it's just a roadside crew worker. Like picks him up. Like, holy shit, we got to get this kid to the hospital. And eventually they do get to the hospital. Again, confusing because it seems that in this moment, Victor has forgiven his dad, but I don't understand the catalyst for it. If anything, I thought to myself, he should be more hateful of his dad because he just saw the damage of a drunk driver, and this reminded him of his dad and how much damage someone like him can do. But no, Victor seems very at peace. He's in the hospital because his feet hurt. He's exhausted, probably needed fluids. They see the victims of the car crash. They're okay. There was a weird scene where the victim was like, the guy came in, the drunk driver came in and gave a statement, said it was you guys and you assaulted him. And I think that the cop believed it. And Thomas is just like, well, looks like we better skip town. I'm like, is it that easy? The cop pulls him in. Actually, this is Tom Skerritt, which I thought was fun that an actor like Tom Skerritt was in this movie. If you know Tom Skerritt, Alien, Top Gun. Tom Skerritt pulls him into the office, gives him this whole thing like, were you drinking? Victor goes, no, I've never had a drop of alcohol in my life. And then the cop goes, what kind of Indian are you? Like, Like he's grilling him. And then at the end of this exchange,
Except he says engine.
He does say engine. And at the end of this exchange where he's grilling him, he finally says, the guy's wife just said he's an asshole, so you're fine. Basically, you're good to go. It's like, wow, I really thought you guys are going to be much bigger jerks to the kids.
So much like unnecessary buildup in the scene.
Yeah.
And then it ends with, well, they recovered items from the truck, and one was a basketball and one was his dad's urn. And he says, I know this is a basketball, but I'm very curious about this. And Victor says, that's my father. And Tom Skerritt takes his hands off the urn and is basically looking like, oh, my bad. And then they're like free to go. It was weird.
It was an odd interaction. So they get back in Arnold's truck.
And Victor straight kicks the basketball. He's like, get the shit out of here. He says, let me hold my dad to Thomas. So Thomas hands Victor the urn. At this point, Victor apologizes to Thomas for not only crashing the car, but quote unquote, I'm sorry for every single wreck in our lives, aka sorry for punching you as a kid multiple times and saying, what color were your parents when they burned up in that house, and all the sick burns he did to Thomas. And he has this redemption moment and he apologizes for basically being a jerk his entire life. So kicking the basketball was symbolic of letting go of his resentment of his dad, because we open up on Victor playing basketball, very macho man, playing pickup games. And then there's a story with Arnold and him playing basketball. That was like the one time they connected and were on quote literally and figuratively the same team. So kicking the basketball, which was funny because that was definitely, it could have been Arnold's basketball, but I was going to say he picked it up from Susie's property. So technically that was Susie's basketball, and he stole it,
jacked it
when he left early in the morning, and then kicked it off in the distance.
Jerk move. I
saw the symbolism there. And they drive back to the Indian reservation. Victor and Thomas have one last moment in the truck together.
Hey, Victor!
Victor gives Thomas half of Arnold's ashes because he means so much to Thomas. And Thomas is about to run back into his grandma's house, comes back, asks,
Hey, Victor, do you know why your dad really left?
And Victor says he didn't mean to. And then we end on a monologue, a narration from Thomas about basically, how do we forgive our fathers? Should we forgive our fathers? And, us as the audience are like, yeah, forgiveness is the best way to go about stuff. Get over conflicts and arguments and disagreements. And we end with Victor spreading ashes off this bridge, I guess in Spokane, Washington, because it looks like the same location from Thomas's flashback story.
It is, yeah.
And then what's Victor do here, Nick? I see you wrote it down. All caps in parentheses.
Just lets out this primal scream at the top of his lungs, like hands raised. Just lets out all the emotion. Yeah, it's kind of like faded, though. It's like mixed in with the background music. It's very dramatic. And that's Smoke Signals.
Directed by Chris Eyre. Okay, Nick, do you have any nitpicks?
Nitpicks. I do have a nitpick. It's really the portrayal of Victor. I get that he's angry and upset, but they try to make him look, I think, worse than he is. Talk about how he's with his mom, didn't see it. And he has some really legitimate gripes. And a lot of people telling him that he's overreacting or to get over it or try and calm him down with these stories, which he knows are obviously fake.
Are you getting flashbacks to Kathy from My Brother the Pig?
Yeah, a lot of gaslighting. I feel like it's a lot of gaslighting.
Everyone around Kathy is insane, but Kathy's the only one grounded in reality.
Yeah, it's actually a really good callback there.
Do you think we were going to bring up My Brother the Pig in season 3, year 2? You bet your ass we were.
Always. That was always going to happen. But yeah, I just, it kind of bothered me that this kid clearly needed someone who just who would listen to him about how abusive his father was towards him and his mom. And instead, everyone in his life is telling him how good of a guy his dad is, and you just need to forgive him. And forgiveness is good, but also so is somebody around for you to forgive, or someone to say they're sorry for what they did for you to forgive them. So Victor really got a raw deal, and I don't like when the movie's forcing a character to go through character development by sort of pigeonholing him into it. Like, he never really got his closure from his dad. He just got people telling him stories about how good he is.
Well, can I counter that with this whole phenomenon of the unreliable narrator? What if Victor's memories are skewed and it wasn't actually as bad as he thought? I'm not saying his dad was an angel, but maybe he actually was more good than bad. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying with the lack of consistency with the truth.
I don't think that's true. The reason being, everything we saw in the flashbacks were true. It was the stories that were not true. So every flashback had truth to it, right? Hit his mom, left the family, alcoholic, was drinking, started the fire. Thomas never even got to deal with the fact that Arnold killed his parents. I'm not sure if that was ever shared with him. Actually, now that I think about it, it wasn't. Probably for the best. Thomas would go into a deep depression. I hear what you're saying, and it's a good counter argument.
I hear what you're saying too, because a lot of storytelling is done, but not every storytelling has a correlating visual flashback. So we have to take the visual flashbacks for face value and say this is the truth, because Thomas tells a couple stories, one about Victor's dad being a protester for like the Vietnam War or something. Never get any visual flashbacks with that. His Denny's Grand Slam flashback, we do have visuals of Arnold and Thomas on the bridge. However, we never see them go to Denny's. Maybe they never went to Denny's. Thomas just made that up. Delusional.
And Thomas is doing the voice for Arnold in that, right? We know that that's Thomas's voice.
But we do have the visual flashback of Victor making the final shot in the basketball scene. However, that is a little bit of an Inception filter because it is a story about a story.
Right.
So Susie is taking Arnold's story for truth, but not true.
We also know Arnold admitted a lot of stuff to Susie too. So Arnold pretty much admits all of his bads.
Speaking of Inception, there was a funny Inception moment because they're watching some program with Native American characters. And Thomas says, you know what's more pathetic than Indians on TV is Indians watching Indians on TV. And I thought, oh, if only I was Indian, I could have had this Inception moment of being an Indian watching Indians on TV. Missed opportunity for me for being white. My nitpick for this movie is the branding. So nothing really with the movie itself. Independent movie, small ass budget, nothing really crazy with the cinematography here or high visuals or even stunts like the car accident. It cuts to black. So nothing really, I'm not going to nitpick it too much for what it is, but just the branding, like the poster is it's Adam Beach, it's Evan Adams, and it's Irene Bedard just all smiling like, hey, let's take a group photo. And they're all just like buddied up. And the title in the beginning is in that papyrus font that is just super dated. It's just,
don't tell Avatar that.
It's small time. So that's my nitpick. Okay, let's move on to talking points. Nick?
Yeah.
Pick a protagonist. Is this movie about Victor? Is this movie about Thomas? Or is this movie about Arnold?
It has to be, in my view, about Victor.
On the surface, it seems like it's about Victor, right? But Thomas is the narrator. Arnold is the one who starts out flawed and then kind of has a redemption arc at the end, although we don't know if it's true because it's all through storytelling.
The reason I say our protagonist has to be Victor is he's the only one who I think actually has any sort of character progression.
I would say Arnold does.
From what we hear about, we don't see any of it.
Because he starts out, saving Thomas as a child. And then he goes into a low point and beats his kid, beats his wife, abandons his family, and then gets sober, meets this super hot neighbor and stops drinking and tells stories about his son, how he loved him and yada, yada. So there's a little bit of an arc there, although on the surface, it definitely seems like it is at least supposed to be Victor.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a great arc for Arnold, if that's the case, because he still never apologizes to his family, sees his kid, makes any meaningful steps at redemption. I mean, he just tells stories that are lies to other people about his kid.
For Victor, like you said, it's just such an unfulfilling turn for him. or it's non-existent almost. Like his turning point is almost not there.
Right.
Whereas Arnold in the flashbacks was talking to Susie saying, "Hey, what's the worst thing you ever did to somebody?" And he's trying to express his grief and relate to somebody so that he can get it off his chest. You know, he doesn't apologize to his son and his wife, but he's trying to have some sort of redemptive experience with this third party. I'm not saying it's a great protagonist or he even is the protagonist, but there is a little bit of an arc insinuated. Doesn't quite get across to the audience, however.
In my view, that would make him a worse person because you're just getting it off your chest to help yourself, and you're actually not trying to make amends with any of the people you've hurt. You're doing it for yourself to make yourself feel better. So,
excellent point. And with a lot of these story arcs coming through flashbacks and stories, do you have any kind of take or opinion on the truth versus the lies in the storytelling in this movie? It seemed like it was a big theme throughout the movie. Whoever is listening to the story always follows up with, "Is that true?"
Yeah, I think the storytelling, the truth versus lie, points to there's either the way things are or the way things you remember them and the way that you want to remember them. Like it's optimism versus pessimism, right? So you could choose to remember things in a good way and you could choose to remember things in a bad way. And sometimes that's helpful and sometimes it's not. So in the example of Thomas telling the story of the 50 fry breads feeding 100 Indians, those are stories that you should let live because they're harmless. But there's also the flip side of that, where remembering things poorly is an act of suppressing reality, right? Of choosing to remember it a different way because it's too painful to not remember it the other way. But I think when you take a character like Victor, who's had so much letdown in his life, I don't blame him for being pessimistic on it. But it is an interesting storytelling device where a lot of times the audience is given this like really, really, really hopeful
left up to
feeling.
Interpretation almost.
Right. And the audience is given this really hopeful feeling of like, wow, it's a cool story. And then the immediate letdown, the emotional letdown of
bomb drop
didn't happen.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I like that. My next talking point is just reservations, Indian reservations. I know when you mentioned, Arnold burned down the house because he was drunk and he was borderline alcoholic. I thought he became an alcoholic after he killed Thomas's parents, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
However, this does stem from the lifestyle, the experience of living on an Indian reservation, because spoiler alert, Indian reservations are not thriving. They're not prospering. They're very isolated. They're underfunded communities. I don't want to generalize, but for the most part, there's a lot of poverty, and this in turn leads to substance abuse and high crime rates and the all around neglect and lack of sources from the federal government or the state government. They kind of just left these communities out to dry. 1830, we had the whole Indian Removal Act. So this is the forced displacement. Andrew Jackson, the Trail of Tears is happening. 1851, the reservations were created saying, you got to get off our land we want, but you can go to these kind of bullshit parts of the country and you can make a whole settlement here. 1887, we have the Dawes Act under Grover Cleveland. So this is basically allotting land to Indian families to promote ranching and agriculture and trying to assimilate them culturally into the U.S. Kind of like what we touched upon in Cimarron, how the U.S. government was trying to assimilate Native Americans and trying to make them citizens. This pretty much ended up in Native Americans selling their land because they couldn't afford to have property because of the property taxes alone. So it was kind of just like a thing where they split up the tribes of having communal property holding, and they made each individual family have lots, and then it pretty much just failed. So this is just like a good example of a government policy that did more harm than good. Classic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to go to do it on this podcast, but yeah, it's not surprising to me. The government's really bad at taking care of people in general. And I mean, you still see it today with a lot of communities that, used to be heavily subsidized. And when you make people rely on government, when they used to be a thriving people who took care of themselves, when you take that away from them and then you expect them to get back on their feet, when you neglect them, when you were their only source of sustenance, it doesn't work out well. Shocking. We have thousands
you stripped
of years
everything
of history.
away. You said, go over here. We'll send you some monthly checks and you should be good. Spoilers, they weren't good.
It's a bad way to govern people.
1934, we get the Indian Reorganization Act. So this encouraged tribes on reservations to draft constitutions and create laws and conduct judicial practices. And tribal councils would control the membership, the property, the conduct, and the justice in these reservations. So living on a reservation, you're subjected to and protected by the laws of your tribal nation, in addition to federal laws, given that modern reservations are held in trust by the federal government.
Except that's not always the case. There's a lot of reservations where the crime is persistent. There's high murder rates. There's people that go missing. There's a lot of child trafficking that ends up happening on reservations because
I should say they're supposedly subjected to laws.
Yeah.
However, due to the underfunded,
the federal government doesn't, and just the lack of willpower to help out in those situations. So
it's a vicious cycle because researching this and seeing, hey, what is it like living on an Indian reservation? Like systemic communities that were set up by the U.S. government hundreds of years ago, decades ago, kind of like ghettos today. They said, hey, here's low income housing. Here you go. Best of luck, man. Except Indian reservations are super secluded and removed from major cities, whereas at least, ghettos are they're adjacent to major cities. So they have resources nearby. However, you are just in no man's land, literally. If you're living on Indian reservation, just underfunded, under-resourced, and it was just set up to fail from the beginning. Unfortunately, the sad truth is. Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota is probably the best example of how poor the living conditions are, because this is one of the lowest income counties in the country. And this Indian reservation would do lock-ins. This is where the particular school in this reservation would do a lock-in for the children. They would literally lock the children inside to play games and keep them away from their parents, because they would time it up when the monthly checks from the government would be sent out. And a lot of these folks would splurge and blow that money on alcohol. The sad truth, be more than likely abuse their children under the influence of alcohol. With the high substance use, the high alcoholism rates in these reservations. This movie does stem from unfortunate circumstances of the indigenous people that were displaced and then just set up to fail.
Yeah, I'd expand on it, but I'm just going to go on a government rant, so I'm just not going to do that.
Why don't you give me 3 sentences?
Yeah, okay, I'll give you 3 sentences, I guess. Number one,
give me 10. Give me 10. Give me 10.
It basically goes like this: you can't take care of people by becoming their main provider. That doesn't incentivize anyone for growth. What you need to do is you need to leave them alone to live their life and create their own communities. You can't have a say in it. And all you do when you subsidize someone's life, you mentioned the ghettos. There's a lot of examples of this up with the poor folks in Appalachia. When you subsidize someone's life, you take away their drive to better themselves. If all you do is subsidize, think about, extreme example, but kids with the trust fund. How well do they adjust to life? They don't, because they don't have to do anything. If the money comes in, you're creating a people or a community or a person who is completely reliant on someone else. And what helps you grow in your life? It's, finding purpose and meaning in your community. And when the community is just sitting there waiting on the next check or waiting on something, you just kill the spirit. You absolutely kill the spirit of a community. And then you do something like give them casinos to run, which just turn into giant prisons.
That was the quick fix
reservations.
Slap.
Yeah,
it's like, you can run a casino if you want, and then some prove to be very profitable, but it drives in more bad crowds and crime.
Yeah.
It's not the moral high ground we're going for.
When you give somebody just enough to get by and don't expect them to go out and do anything, then you really kill their will and their spirit.
I'm just going to collect my check because you're sending it out, man. So thanks. I don't need to do much except go down to the liquor store, or a lot of reservations actually are dry reservations by law and their own tribal laws. But they would just go outside the reservation limits, go to 7-Eleven, get a 30 rack of Coors Light and call it a day.
You basically killed the spirit of a community, of a people, and you go, well, why did that happen? And then you just keep implementing very similar policies with other communities to this day, when it's just so destructive. It's so destructive. And I refuse to believe that the people who are running this country and other places in the world don't know that. And so I have a cynical view of it, that it's beneficial to keep certain populations down. And there's very easy ways economically to do that. And it happens all the time, all around us. And it just really grinds my fucking gears. I hate it.
It's very depressing to think about, because it's a very vicious cycle, because everyone's in this shit circumstance and there's not a lot of drive or incentive to better themselves because of the shit hand that they were dealt.
Mm-hmm.
They're sent petty checks from the government. So they're like, okay, cool. I guess I'm somewhat being taken care of, even though I don't have running water or electricity, but I'm just going to keep on going while it's going. So this just perpetuates poor living conditions and crime and drug use and abuse and alcoholism. And even the healthcare system failed, because they'll say, oh, we got the Indian Healthcare Institute. We're going to send in doctors to these super underserved communities. And guess what? The doctors are going to get burnt out because they're going in there with a high moral mission statement. And they're going to constantly be getting patients because of the poor living conditions. And they're either going to quit or they're going to become jaded and not care because of the piss poor conditions that the reservations are in.
I mean, the data's out there. Kids who grow up on welfare end up on welfare. You know, it's like you said, it's a vicious cycle, and it's a cycle that as long as it's, again, you're talking about 4% of the population. It's just small percent of the population, so it's not. There's no incentive.
I don't even think it's 4%. I think it's like under 3, maybe. I was saying 4 to be safe.
Yeah, I don't know what the population is, but it's not enough to
Very small.
cause change, which is really dumb. When it just upsets me. It upsets me when the government just ruins people's lives and then shrugs their shoulders like, I don't know. It's like
Nick, you got a talking point for me?
I do. The ending was weird, and so was the, if you want to call it, the emotional payoff of the movie, right? Victor's 180 of forgiving his dad. Don't understand the turning point. That car crash scene seemed to have been it. Him saving somebody, sacrificing himself to try and help this woman. I don't know. I thought maybe he'd have a come to Jesus with a drunk driver who would remind him of his dad. That didn't happen. It's really unfortunate, because up to this point, the movie's done a really good job, in my opinion, of getting you emotionally invested, feeling for Victor, feeling for Thomas. He's a little lost and he just wanted a dad, so he's thinking of this guy differently. And there's this big emotional scene with the car crash, and it's hectic. And then it's almost like they didn't know how to finish the payoff, which is unfortunate, because I thought that there was a lot there that they could have, right? I feel like you could have had a really great payoff there.
It's missing a good chunk of the story development there.
Yeah. So that was my talking point.
I see what you're saying there. I did feel like the big revelation of Arnold starting the fire, and Susie gives this revelation to Victor. It was supposed to be very emotional, but it just didn't quite stick for me for some reason.
Yeah, I think we all sort of knew, like you were trying to make Arnold seem like more of a piece of shit, and I'd already accepted that he's a really big piece of shit. So you're just like really angering Victor even more. That's the last news he got of his dad before deciding to forgive him. So it's like, oh, now my dad's also a murderer. So I'm not even looking for a response, but it just seemed weird and unfortunate for this movie to not be able to stick that landing.
And I agree with you. Okay, Nick, let's move on to our mini awards here. A very fun part of the episode. This is where we go on about some little fun takeaways from this movie and might pop up at the end of the year episode.
Ooh.
Best weapon in this movie. Not a lot of weapons in this movie. Can you give me some sort of answer?
There's really only one weapon to speak of, James, and that's Arnold's fists. They're the only thing that did damage in this movie.
Can someone's hands be a weapon?
You could have your hands registered as a weapon, yeah. I think Jean-Claude Van Damme did something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe the car that the drunk driver was driving.
That's not a bad one. The knife that he cut his hair with, but...
Yeah, I feel like Arnold's fists were more prevalent in the story, however. So I feel inclined to agree with you. It's Arnold's fists.
Yes.
And speaking of, you got any big pieces of shit there for this movie?
I mean, it's Arnold. It has to be Arnold. We even talked about maybe he had a redemption arc. I don't think he did. I don't think he ever redeemed himself personally. I think he only became more of a piece of shit as the movie went on. Oh, he just talked about his son. It's like, okay, or pick up the phone and call him. Like, what are we talking about here, Arnold? You know what I mean? He never made amends, and all he did was tell stories and get things off his chest to make himself feel better. That's even worse. If you hurt people and then you just go on a journey to make yourself feel better without ever trying to make amends with the people you've hurt, and then you never share with anybody who has any kind of power. Like, you should have been taking care of Thomas a lot more. Oh my God, maybe he took Thomas to Denny because he killed his parents. Maybe that's why he was nice to Thomas. Maybe that's why he was, maybe that's why he was nice to Thomas.
No, I think that's 100% true. I don't think that's
I didn't pick up on that.
Conspiracy.
I didn't pick up. No, I don't think it's conspiracy. It finally hit me.
It finally clicked for Nick, everybody.
It did.
He has so much regret and guilt for killing his parents. That's why he was overtly nice to Thomas.
But the only person he ever told about this was the person who couldn't do anything and knew nothing about it. Like, you didn't tell the people of your tribe. You're a terrible member of your tribe. You killed 2 people and then just hid it forever and sank into your alcoholism. Oh, no, this guy's a piece of shit. James, how about you? How do you feel? Who's your piece of shit for this movie?
I had a pretty clear answer. The biggest piece of shit of this movie is Bert Cicero. And if you don't know what that name is, it's the name of the drunk driver that almost killed somebody and wanted to pin it on Victor in a drunken rant. And even the next day, when he supposedly sobered up, still doubled down and said, no, it was Victor and Thomas. They tried to kill me and they assaulted me and the accident was their fault. That's a pretty big piece of shit right there.
Big piece of shit move.
Huge.
He didn't actually kill anybody. Arnold's got a kill count of 2.
That's true. I do think that the drunk driver was a pretty big piece of shit.
Bert was ready to rack up a kill. Yeah. He saw this lady dying.
This was the start.
And was like, leave her. She's dead. He was ready to move on with his day. And maybe he's killed before in his drunken driving. We don't know. Yeah. So he's a good candidate.
Not a lot of screen time versus Arnold, but pretty scumbag move.
His piece of shit per minute on screen is pretty high.
I think if I had to make a pick, though, I think just due diligence, got to go with Arnold. But I just want to throw the drunk driver up there because he was a pretty big fucking piece of shit.
Yeah, it's a great mention.
MVP of this movie, who do you got?
MVP of this movie, I'd probably go with Susie Song. She was nice. She tried her best with everything. She didn't ask for any of this. She just had a neighbor and tried to tell his family that he died and then had to deal with the kids. And she was just a smoke show.
And she was super hot.
Smoke signal, smoke show. Other than that, the other MVP would be Lester Falls Apart.
Oh,
Lester Falls Apart was an MVP for me.
A dark horse. Okay. In the MVP race. I like that.
How about you? Who's your most valuable smoke signal?
I'm going to go with Thomas. I think he's the heart and soul of this movie. Pretty obvious answer. He's very likable. He's very funny. I like this character and I like what he brought to the table in this movie. Although I do like your MVPs as well.
Thank you. All right, James, give me your give me 2. Give me your worst scene of this movie and then give me your best scene of this movie.
You want me to hit you back to back?
Yeah, hit me back to back.
Okay. All right. Switching it up this week. Worst scene, I'm going to say the sheriff scene when they got pulled into the office. There was a lot of unnecessary dramatic buildup, like they were going to arrest them. and the cop says some insensitive things, and he's building it up like, oh, like, do you have your side of the story straight? If you don't, I'm going to put you in handcuffs. It was just all for naught. You revealed at the end that the wife admitted the drunk driver, shocker, was an asshole and couldn't be trusted. So you just kind of wasted Victor and Thomas's time. And then you end with the, again, the unnecessary suspense of, oh, this is a basketball, but what's in this container right here? Like it's drugs or something. And then Victor's like, it's my dead dad. The cop is like, oh, my bad. It just seemed like super unnecessary suspense and buildup. And it was just kind of like a time waster. A little bit of laughs in there, but ultimately not needed for the movie. So that's my worst scene in this movie. Best scene, however, I'm going to nominate is the Arnold basketball story scene. And there was a lot of big He Got Game vibes from this scene. Have you ever seen that movie, Denzel Washington and Ray Allen? They play a very distant father and son, never connected on the same level, but they did connect through the game of basketball. And that was the one time they were on the same team. I like when shows and movies have actors just ramble and tell stories. And whether they show it in flashbacks or they don't show it at all, I think it's just like a nice opportunity to let the actor cook. And I think Gary Farmer was cooking in this scene. And I like the setting. It was kind of like the opening of Space Jam, just a basketball hoop in a spotlight. And there's a dramatic canyon background as your scenery. It was Arnold trying to make up for lost time. And it was happy and it was a high point, but it ultimately was sad and a low point because he was just making it up.
The writing on that monologue that he did was really good.
It was sick with it. Nick, you got a worst scene and best scene for me?
The worst scene for me was after the car crash when Victor starts running down the highway and sees his dad. I still don't get the scene. I don't understand it. He ran himself into the ground, and then the ghost of his dad picks him up, but it's a construction worker who then takes him to the hospital. And the next thing we see, he's at the hospital and he's like smiling and apologizing to Thomas. Like he just had this change of character while like running down the highway.
It was force feeding the audience. Like Victor learned a message here. He learned his lesson, and we don't know what it was or why.
You should probably tell the audience what the lesson was. Best scene for me is something we did not go over in plot talk. However, I thought it was really good. There's a flashback scene with Victor. He's throwing beer cans at his dad's truck because he's angry in the middle of the night. The next day, his mom says no more drinking. She tries to take the beer out of his hand. He smacks her. And eventually he just walks out the door to leave. Victor, as young Victor, very conflicted. Obviously, he's like looking at his dad hit his mom. You know, he wants his dad to leave, but then all of a sudden the kid just like starts sprinting after the truck, hops the fence, jumps into the back of the truck so that his dad won't leave. Dad gets out, picks him up, and you think his dad's going to stay because he hugs him, and then he puts him down next to his mom and then drives off. I thought it was a really emotional scene. I thought it was really good. Hit the pain of his dad leaving and kind of the conflict of he probably wanted his dad to leave because he's hitting his mom, he's hitting him, he's an alcoholic. But like when the moment actually came for his dad to leave, he just had this instinct of that's my dad and I can't let him leave.
And the dad had the instinct of that's my son and I love him, even though I'm a raging piece of shit.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap this up with our sarcastic selling points. Nick, can you hit me with yours first?
My sarcastic selling point is a coming-of-age road trip story with a boy trying to get over his super dead dad and his autistic friend.
I love that. Mine's kind of in the spirit of that. I said this is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with Coeur d'Alene Indians. Thomas is John Candy.
Thomas is John.
Final review. Fight.
Let's see what the other guys are saying. Let's see if they are Fry Bread fans or if they are smoke signal stinkers up in this B. First up, we got Rotten Tomatoes. Critics, 90% of the critics enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, they really did love it. And 82% of the audience gave this movie a thumbs up.
All right, we're in the green here. We're going to move over to Metacritic. The average Metacritic score is 76, translates to a 7.6 on our scale.
So much lower than the critics and audience on Rotten Tomatoes. And then the people of Metacritic gave it a 6.6. So we're going down steadily over here. And now for our house burning, life turning, child hurting, Susie Song Smoke Show score from IMDb, a 7.2.
Oh my God.
Dude,
how are we on the same level with this stuff?
Blows
week
my
after week.
mind.
Same wavelength. Okay, Nick.
All right. It's your turn.
Let me hit you with my laughable log line, followed by my popcorn points and my final overall thoughts of this movie. An abusive dad leaves his family behind at an Idaho Indian reservation and then dies in Arizona, where his bitter son and his socially awkward friend take a road trip to go pick up his ashes and pickup truck. And my popcorn points are gonna fall in. I'm gonna slap it with the 7.1, which is the exact same as Big Fat Liar for me.
Wow.
And let me tell you why. I'm going to give you my Tabasco analogy.
Okay.
Tabasco was the first hot sauce to commercially sell very well. Obviously, hot sauce was a thing before Tabasco. However, Tabasco was the one that signed, sealed, delivered hot sauce to your door. This movie was the first voice that indigenous people had for Western Hollywood movies. First Native American movie directed, produced, written, starred. It was very refreshing for audiences in 1998, and it was very necessary to take that step. However, I feel like there's so much better stories to be told with this type of voice and this type of perspective that although this movie was very necessary, I don't think it did a standout stellar job. However, I do give it its credit for its characters. I think this movie is very character driven. Obviously, the production value is not crazy. $2 million in 1998 doesn't get you a whole lot. However, I think the voice of this movie is very important. It was very important to tell Native American stories and perspective. And I appreciate that. I had a lot of good laughs in this movie. There's a lot of good moments. There was a lot of realism with this movie. However, like we discussed, I didn't feel like it had a convincing turning point for Victor, but the climax just wasn't convincing sell for me. But I don't think I can dink it down to the 6s. I still think this movie belongs in the 7s based on its identity as a voice, and I still think it's a very likable movie, and I enjoyed watching this, and I would watch it again in the future. However, it's nothing, there's no razzle dazzle with this. This is just cayenne pepper, vinegar, and water. It's Tabasco. It was the first of its kind. It was very necessary. However, there's so much more better stories you can tell. There's such a better direction you can take with Native American storytelling in modern day America. So this movie's Tabasco to me. There's better hot sauces out there, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. Let me hit you with my log line and then my final thoughts here.
Hit me.
An abusive dad kills a family in a fire, but yeets the baby out of the window and eventually abandons his family and dies, leaving his son to deal with a whole lot of emotional trauma. Oh, this was a tough one for me.
You could be honest.
I'm going to give it a 5.9.
There it is.
I hear everything you said, and all that's good, but I'm just going off of strictly the story it told, because I think what I liked about this movie a lot, and what Chris Eyre did, the things I liked is, this is a story that could be told from a lot of different views, right? It could, from all different ethnicities, probably have very similar stories to this, right? Abusive dad left and the kid has to deal with it. I appreciate the way that he put a spin on it for his own culture, but it's a tale. It's still a good tale, regardless of who it is. And then you get the points for the way you integrated everything else into it. So I think that's great. And I like that you do that, right? And I'm sure it was his point. He's saying, like, I'm not making this like a niche. I'm going to make it a story everyone can relate to, and I'm going to put my flavor on it. And I think I think he did a great job of doing that. Really, the emotional payoff for me, that's really hard. You could have if you're an Olympian, if you're an Olympic gymnast on a bus to Phoenix
in Idaho,
you could go ahead and have, one of the best routines ever. And when you don't stick the landing, they're going to hold up a 6, right? Because sticking that landing and getting that payoff of the whole story is just so big to me. I feel like there was more to the story that maybe wanted to be told, maybe more character development for Victor that could have been in there, how he was before he went on this, how he was as an adolescent before he went on this journey with Thomas, maybe more about Thomas, kind of his lack of father figure that informs a lot of what he does. I know you don't always have the time to tell that story, but I really, you brought it up earlier, but kind of like My Brother the Pig, I just sympathized with Victor the whole time. And I don't feel like he was a bad person. I don't think he needed to change that much. Yeah, he was a jerk to Thomas, but Thomas just kept bringing up his dead dad who abandoned him and telling him how great he was. Somebody needed to talk to this kid, his mom, friends, somebody to go ahead and make sure he was okay. But really all they did was sweep the problems under the rug and try to tell him to let it go. And his dad wasn't that bad, when his dad just traumatized the shit out of him. And he never got the payoff, or he never got the closure he deserved. All we got was him running down a highway and then he forgave people. I also did not like do you know why your dad left? And then he didn't mean to. I don't get what that meant. I don't really understand what we were going for there. I think a much better payoff for it might have been Victor realizing that some people just might be bad people and that doesn't have to define who you are. I think that would have been a much better lesson for Victor to learn than I forgive my dad because he just didn't know any better. That's a tough lesson for me to get at the end. So because the ending just really was I would call it a swing and a miss. I don't even think it was a swing. You just watched a strike go down the pipe for strike 3 when the bases were loaded. You had everything set up for you and you just stumbled at the end. So that really hurt it for me because it kind of took everything else that happened before it and invalidated a lot of it for me. So 5.9. I can't get it into the 6s, unfortunately.
Okay, I appreciate that. Your thoughts echo my sentiments. Well, that's Smoke Signals, and that's our thoughts on it. And I think that was a pretty fine example of the oral tradition, if I do say so myself.
Nice.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Please follow us on Instagram and YouTube at Just Play It Podcast. Please follow us on X at Just Play It Pod. And tune in next week when we return with a familiar character in possibly an ancient facility that may have the thematic qualities of a scary place.
Wow.
Give me something.
Just wow.
What do you got?
We're going to see a return of a character from this season.
A very important character, a character of the year. Who knows who that could be?
Who knows who that could be? If you're a listener, you have an idea.
Tune in next week. We'll see you then. We're heading gone. And remember, if you drive off away from Idaho and your yellow truck and your son has to go pick it up, you better make sure it's got gas in it. Otherwise, it's not making its way back to the reservation, dog.
Obviously, Arnold's drunk driving, and we don't like that.
Missed opportunity for me for being white.